On the morning of October 28, 2007, a 23-year-old mother of two left her home in Bolingbrook, Illinois. It was a Sunday. She was supposed to help a family member paint a house that day. She never arrived. Through the afternoon and into the evening, her phone went unanswered, and then directly to voicemail. By early the next morning, her sister was standing at a police department desk filing a missing persons report. And in the nearly 2 decades that have passed since that morning, Stacy Peterson has not been seen. That single documented fact, a young woman who said goodbye to a Sunday and was never heard from again, is the foundation of a case that became one of the most closely watched disappearance investigations in modern American history. It produced a murder conviction for a related crime. It rewrote Illinois evidentiary law. It kept a family in unresolved grief for nearly 20 years. And it still has not produced the one thing the people who loved Stacy Peterson most urgently need: an answer about where she is. This is not a story built from invention or speculation. Everything that follows comes from verified court records, official police statements, sworn testimony, confirmed news coverage from credible outlets, and the documented public statements of investigators, prosecutors, and family members. Where the record is uncertain or contested, this narration says so directly. Where facts are disputed, this narration names the dispute. Where evidence points in a direction, but no official conclusion has been formally reached, this narration describes that precisely. The gaps in this story are as real and as important as the documented facts. In some ways more so, because a missing person case is defined, at its core, by what the public record cannot answer. This narration will name those gaps rather than fill them with anything that cannot be sourced. Her name was Stacy Ann Cales. She was born on January 20, 1984, in Downers Grove, DuPage County, Illinois. She was 23 years old when she disappeared. Her official missing persons description, as entered into the public record by law enforcement, documents that she was 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighed approximately 100 pounds, had long, straight brown hair with blonde highlights and brown eyes. She had a tattoo of a blue and yellow carnation on the small of her back, a tattoo of 2 red cherries with a stem and green leaves on the front of her left hip, and a scar across her stomach. Those physical details are drawn directly from the official missing persons record as publicly released. The community she lived in was Bolingbrook, Illinois, a municipality in Will County, roughly 30 miles southwest of downtown Chicago along the Interstate 55 corridor. Bolingbrook is a mid-sized American suburb that grew substantially across the latter half of the 20th century as the greater Chicago metropolitan area expanded outward. By the time of Stacy Peterson's disappearance, it had a population of approximately 70,000 residents. It is organized largely around residential subdivisions, commuter infrastructure, and the kind of institutional fabric common to large American suburbs: schools, parks, churches, municipal services, and a local police department. The house Stacy shared with her husband was at 6 Pheasant Chase Court, an address confirmed in the public record of this case. Bolingbrook sits in a part of Will County that grew considerably from the 1970s onward. Many of its residents commute into Chicago or the broader metropolitan employment centers. It is not a place that had ever become a focal point of national crime coverage before 2007. The community had no particular reason to expect what the following months would bring. What happened on Pheasant Chase Court in the autumn of 2007 placed this suburb into a very different kind of public spotlight. Not because the community was unusual, but because the case that unfolded there was. Ordinary streets in ordinary towns become different places when a case like this one takes root in them. The people who lived around Stacy Peterson found their community in the national news for reasons no one in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac expects. If you have ever lived in a place like this, a suburban street where neighbors know the sound of each other's cars, and roughly when each household's lights come on, you know that proximity does not mean knowledge. A house can contain a great deal of invisible danger. The exterior of a family home tells almost nothing about what is happening inside. The distance between what is visible from the street and what is happening behind a closed door can be vast. This case demonstrates that distance with particular and painful clarity. Stacy Peterson's childhood was marked by instability and loss. Her mother, Christy Marie Cales, was herself a missing person. Christy Cales vanished when Stacy was still a teenager, leaving a wound that was never healed and a family already fractured by absence before Stacy reached adulthood. Stacy had a sister, Cassandra Cales, a brother named Yelton Cales, and a half-sister named Tina Kokas. Her father was Anthony Cales. These family members are confirmed in the public record. Cassandra Cales would go on to become, in the years and decades after Stacy disappeared, the most publicly active member of the family in the sustained effort to find her. Our community understands what it means to grow up in a household shaped by disappearance, to learn early in life that people you love can simply stop being reachable, and to develop, out of necessity, a relationship with uncertainty that most children never have to confront. The particular cruelty of Stacy Peterson's story is that she knew what it meant to have a missing mother. She had lived it herself, and the documented record of this case strongly suggests she carried all of that. The loss, the early instability, the gap where a mother should have been, into a situation that would ultimately cost her everything. In approximately 2001, when Stacy was 17 years old, she was working as a desk clerk at a hotel in Bolingbrook, Illinois. It was there that she encountered Drew Walter Peterson. Drew Peterson was born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook. He was 47 years old when they met, a sergeant with the Bolingbrook Police Department, still married to his third wife, Kathleen Savio. Being a police sergeant gave him something specific in a community like Bolingbrook: institutional standing, a badge, working relationships with the local law enforcement infrastructure, and a detailed knowledge of how investigations were conducted and how they could be managed. All of that context is relevant to what followed. Drew Peterson had been married before Kathleen Savio. His first marriage to Carol Brown lasted from 1974 to 1980. His second, to Vicki Connolly, ran from 1982 to 1992. His marriage to Kathleen Savio began in 1992 and ended in divorce in 2003. These details are confirmed in the public record. By the time he encountered Stacy Cales, he was a man who had been through multiple marriages, carried legal and financial entanglements from each, and had children from prior relationships who were part of his daily life. The relationship between Drew Peterson and Stacy Cales developed while he was still married. He divorced Savio in 2003, and he and Stacy were married in October of that same year, 3 months after the birth of their first child together, a son Stacy named Anthony after her father. By the time of Stacy's disappearance in October 2007, the couple had 2 children together, a son aged 4 and a daughter aged 2. Drew Peterson also had 2 older children from prior marriages, aged 12 and 14, who were part of the household at 6 Pheasant Chase Court. The age difference between Stacy and Drew Peterson was 30 years. She was 23 when she disappeared. He was 53. That documented disparity is not a moral argument by itself, but it is part of the documented context, a context that includes her difficult background, her husband's institutional authority as a police sergeant, the existence of prior marriages and prior entanglements, and the dynamics of the household as described by multiple witnesses in formal court proceedings. Our community understands what it means to be very young, raising small children, 30 years younger than a spouse who carries professional authority and community standing, and trying to find a way out of something that has become frightening. The specific courage that requires, particularly when the person you are afraid of is someone with a badge, someone who understands exactly how the protective systems around you function, someone who knows which calls will be taken seriously and which will not, is not easy to describe from the outside. People in those situations often make the calls they think they can. They tell a pastor, they tell a neighbor, they call an attorney, they say the things they can say, in the form they can say them. The documented record of Stacy Peterson's final months suggests she was doing exactly that. The record is equally clear about what happened before she had the chance to do more. What the public record shows about Stacy Peterson's state of mind in the weeks before her disappearance does not come from inference or reconstruction. It comes from sworn testimony given by multiple witnesses in formal court proceedings, subjected to legal challenge, ruled on by a judge, and in multiple cases admitted into the permanent evidentiary record of a murder trial. The most important thing to understand about this testimonial record is that it is not speculation or rumor. It is evidence, entered under oath, that a court found credible and admissible under Illinois law. Sharon Byczowski, a neighbor on Pheasant Chase Court, testified at a pretrial hearsay hearing in January 2010 that she had come upon Stacy Peterson crying outside her home at some point before the disappearance. According to Byczowski's sworn testimony, Stacy told her, "I'm already dead." Byczowski wept during parts of her testimony. That statement, documented in court, was not a figure of speech. It was a declaration made by a young woman who, by the weight of everything the evidence shows, understood her own danger, and who made that declaration to a neighbor on a suburban street in words that would eventually be carried into a murder trial. Reverend Neil Shorey, a pastor who had spoken with Stacy, testified at those same proceedings. His testimony established that Stacy told him she woke in the early hours of March 1, 2004, to find her husband absent from their home. The significance of that date is central. Kathleen Savio's body was found on March 1, 2004. The death, initially ruled accidental and later reclassified as homicide, occurred on the same day Stacy told her pastor she had woken to find Drew Peterson absent in the night. Attorney Harry Smith testified in the murder trial that Stacy contacted him in the days before her disappearance and, in his words, wanted to know if, in my opinion, the fact that he killed Kathy could be used against him. That testimony, admitted under the hearsay statute, placed Stacy's own contemporaneous belief about her husband's guilt on the formal evidentiary record of a court. She was asking a lawyer a legal question about the man she was living with. Days later, she was gone. To fully understand the context of Stacy Peterson's disappearance, it is necessary to understand what had happened 3 years earlier with Drew Peterson's third wife. These two women's stories are inseparable in the official record. The disappearance of the fourth wife caused investigators to look again at the death of the third. The re-examination of the third wife's death produced the evidence that eventually convicted the man suspected of causing both. What happened to Kathleen Savio in 2004 and what happened to Stacy Peterson in 2007 are, in the documented legal record of this case, part of a single connected history. Kathleen Savio and Drew Peterson were married in 1992 and divorced in 2003. The divorce was, by multiple documented accounts, contested and acrimonious. On March 1, 2004, Savio's body was found in the dry, clean bathtub of her Bolingbrook home, only blocks from 6 Pheasant Chase Court, by confirmed reporting. The Will County coroner initially ruled the death an accidental drowning. No criminal investigation was opened. Drew Peterson, as confirmed in the public record, subsequently collected life insurance policies totaling approximately $1 million. Kathleen Savio's family disputed the ruling publicly, but their concerns did not produce a formal reinvestigation at that time. The case was closed. Life went on. It would take 3 more years, and the disappearance of another woman from the same household, for the record to be corrected, and for a court to eventually determine that what happened in that bathtub on March 1, 2004, was not an accident. That ruling stood for more than 3 years, unchallenged in any official proceeding. It was Stacy Peterson's disappearance in 2007 that caused investigators to look again at what had happened to Kathleen Savio, and what that reconsideration revealed would reshape the entire trajectory of the case. On November 9, 2007, 12 days after Stacy was last seen, the Illinois State Police formally declared Drew Peterson the sole suspect in Stacy's disappearance. On that same day, as part of a coordinated investigative action, a judge signed an order to exhume Kathleen Savio's body, and state police launched a formal investigation into her 2004 death. Forensic pathologist Michael Baden, hired by the Savio family, was among those who examined the remains. The finding of the second autopsy revised the official record entirely. Kathleen Savio's death was reclassified from accidental drowning to homicide. The case that had been closed and filed away for 3 years was now formally a murder investigation, and the man at its center was also the sole named suspect in the disappearance of the woman he had married after Savio's death. Now to the documented events of October 28, 2007. The official record of that day is built from police reports, court testimony, family accounts, and the physical evidence that investigators gathered in the days and weeks that followed. It is, in important ways, a record of what was absent, calls that were not answered, a car that was found where it should not have been, a phone that stopped working, and a story from a husband that no independent evidence has ever confirmed. What is established in court records, police statements, and confirmed reporting is as follows. That Sunday morning, Stacy Peterson was seen leaving her home at approximately 9 or 10 o'clock. She was expected to meet a family member to help with a house painting job. She did not arrive. Through the afternoon, her sister Cassandra Cales attempted to reach her repeatedly by phone. The calls went unanswered, going directly to voicemail. Cassandra Cales has confirmed publicly this was out of character for her sister. Prolonged silence was unusual and alarming. At around 11 o'clock that evening, Cassandra Cales drove to the Peterson home on Pheasant Chase Court. According to her documented account, the couple's young children told her that their parents had argued before Stacy left that morning, and that Drew Peterson had gone out looking for her. Cassandra Cales reached Drew Peterson by phone shortly afterward. His stated account of events, given to Cassandra and subsequently repeated to media and law enforcement on multiple occasions, was this. Stacy had called him at approximately 9 in the evening to say she was leaving him. According to Peterson, she told him she was going away with another man, planned to take a vacation, and had taken $25,000 from a home safe, her passport, and a bikini. He said she had left her car somewhere in Bolingbrook. Cassandra Cales did not believe this account. At 1:36 in the morning on October 29, 2007, she went to the Bolingbrook Police Department and filed a missing person report on her sister's behalf. The report was filed in the early hours of a Monday morning by a young woman who had spent the night trying to reach her sister, visiting the family home, and listening to a story from a brother-in-law that she found immediately implausible. Police notified Drew Peterson of the missing person report at approximately 2:30 in the morning. He reiterated his version of events: the phone call at 9, the packed bag, the other man, the voluntary departure, to the responding officers. That account, given in the first hours of the formal investigation, would be the account he repeated, publicly and to law enforcement, for years. Stacy Peterson's car, a purple two-door 2002 Pontiac, was subsequently found in the parking lot of Clough Airport, approximately 400 yards from the house on Pheasant Chase Court. The proximity of that finding to the family home was noted by investigators and has been part of the documented record of the case since the earliest days of the investigation. A woman who was supposed to have driven away voluntarily, who had packed a bag and called to say goodbye, had left her car in a parking lot within walking distance of the house she had supposedly left. Her cell phone was never used again after October 28, 2007. No transaction on the $25,000, no passport activity, and no confirmed independent sighting of Stacy Peterson has appeared in any verified source in the years since. His account, which he has maintained publicly for nearly 2 decades, has never been supported by a single verified, independent piece of evidence placed in the public record. If you have ever waited for a call that did not come, not for an hour but for days, then weeks, then months, then years, you understand something of what this silence has meant to the people who loved her. Waiting without resolution is its own specific kind of endurance. It requires holding 2 contradictory positions simultaneously: the acknowledgement that someone is almost certainly gone, and the refusal to accept that absence as final without proof. Cassandra Cales has held those 2 positions for nearly 2 decades. So have Stacy's children, in whatever form they have been able to understand their mother's disappearance at each age they have passed through. The silence that began on October 28, 2007, has not ended. The national media response to Stacy Peterson's disappearance was immediate and substantial. The combination of circumstances made it almost impossible for news organizations to look away. A missing young mother, a police sergeant husband with a prior dead wife who had just been re-examined as a homicide victim, a 30-year age gap between them, and dramatic public contradictions between what Drew Peterson was saying and what investigators were finding. Major national outlets were covering the case within days. Television programs devoted extended segments to it. Reporters stationed themselves outside the house on Pheasant Chase Court. The case became a fixture of daytime and primetime news coverage for an extended period. Drew Peterson's behavior in front of cameras became a story of its own. He appeared before reporters on multiple occasions and gave television interviews. He maintained consistently that Stacy had left voluntarily. In some early appearances, his demeanor struck many observers as at odds with the gravity of what was being investigated. He claimed at one point to have received an anonymous letter from someone who had seen Stacy alive and well in Peoria, Illinois, a claim never corroborated in the official record. He said she had been under psychiatric care and was irritable before she vanished. People who knew her said she had been afraid. He retired from the Bolingbrook Police Department in November 2007 as the investigative pressure mounted. A Will County grand jury was convened. Searches of waterways, fields, and properties in the area were conducted by state police and volunteer groups. None of them produced Stacy Peterson. The account given by Drew Peterson's stepbrother, Thomas Morphy, stands as one of the most significant elements of the documented public record. Morphy testified under oath at a pretrial hearsay hearing in January 2010, speaking for approximately 3 hours in a packed courtroom. He was 42 years old at the time of his testimony. What he described covered the day before and the day of Stacy Peterson's disappearance, and it placed him at the center of events in ways that were deeply difficult by his own account to carry. According to Morphy's sworn testimony, on October 27, 2007, the Saturday before Stacy vanished, Drew Peterson drove him to a park. During that drive, Morphy testified, Peterson asked him, "How much do you love me?" When Morphy replied, Peterson asked, "Enough to kill for me?" Morphy told the court he responded by saying he always assumed Peterson had killed Kathleen Savio, and that Peterson denied it, saying, "I would never kill Kathleen. She was a good mother." Morphy also testified that Peterson expressed during that conversation an intention to harm Stacy because she was planning to divorce him, seek custody of their children, and take his money. The following day, Sunday, October 28th, Peterson came to Morphy's home and brought him back to Pheasant Chase Court. There, Morphy testified, Peterson entered the master bedroom and rolled out a large blue barrel that Morphy estimated weighed up to 150 pounds. Peterson asked him to help carry it. Morphy's precise sworn testimony, entered into the court record, was, "He had me grab an end, he grabbed the other end, and we proceeded down the stairs. It felt warm." The two men loaded the barrel into Peterson's Yukon Denali SUV. Morphy testified that neither man discussed what was inside it. After Peterson drove him home, his parting words, Morphy testified, were, "This never happened." Morphy agreed to say nothing, but did not keep that agreement. In the days that followed, distressed and drinking heavily, he told his girlfriend, his brother, and a neighbor. He then attempted to take his own life and was hospitalized. He was subsequently held in state police custody for approximately 2 months. He was offered immunity in exchange for his cooperation, but, as of the time of the 2010 pre-trial hearing, had not yet testified before a grand jury. Morphy stopped short of testifying that Peterson had admitted murdering Stacy, and he was clear he never saw the barrel's contents. But his conclusion, given in documented public statements, was unambiguous. He told ABC News Good Morning America, "I know he killed Stacy. All the circumstances point to it." Drew Peterson denied the account entirely, calling Morphy's version a hallucination. The story of the blue barrel became one of the most discussed elements of this case. Multiple searches over the years, involving divers, sonar equipment, and systematic waterway searches in the greater Chicago area, focused on finding it. The barrel has never been located. Our community understands what it means to be inside a situation that seems impossible to fully explain to people who were not there. To know something is deeply wrong, and to carry that knowledge while being uncertain, even terrified, about what to do. Thomas Morphy's testimony comes from a man who was deeply embedded in a family dynamic that left him few safe choices. He agreed to silence. He broke that silence within days, at personal cost. He then attempted to take his own life. The path from witnessing something you cannot explain to making a statement in a court of law is rarely straightforward. Morphy's testimony is part of the sworn, official evidentiary record. It has been challenged, but it was found admissible, heard in formal proceedings, and cannot be separated from the documented history of this case. On May 7, 2009, 1 year and 7 months after Stacy Peterson's disappearance, Drew Peterson was arrested at his Bolingbrook home and charged with the first-degree murder of Kathleen Savio. Bail was set at $20 million. He was transported to the Will County Jail in Joliet. The charge was based on the reclassification of Savio's death as homicide and on the evidence developed since Stacy vanished. No charge was filed in connection with Stacy's disappearance. That absence, a formal charge for the murder of the third wife, silence on the disappearance of the fourth, would define the legal landscape of this case for years to come. The legal road to trial was long and consequential beyond the individual case. One of the most significant battles was over the admissibility of hearsay evidence. Both Kathleen Savio and Stacy Peterson were unavailable to testify. Under standard evidentiary rules, most of their statements to third parties would have been inadmissible. Prosecutors argued those statements were essential. The Illinois General Assembly responded by passing what became known as Drew's Law, a statute creating a mechanism by which hearsay statements from individuals who are dead or missing could be admitted into evidence, provided a judge found that the defendant's own conduct had caused the witness's unavailability. The law was designed in direct response to the specific evidentiary gap this case exposed. It was challenged on constitutional grounds from the moment of its passage. Defense attorneys argued it violated the Sixth Amendment right to confront witnesses. That constitutional question would ultimately be resolved by the Illinois Supreme Court. Judge Edward Bermila presided over the Will County proceedings. In January 2010, he conducted a series of pre-trial hearsay hearings that determined which statements could be admitted. Those hearings, held over multiple days in a courtroom that drew substantial media and public attention, produced much of the documented testimony about the circumstances of Stacy Peterson's disappearance that is now part of the permanent public record. Morphy's account of the Blue Barrel, Byczowski's testimony about Stacy saying she was already dead, Shkory's account of March 1, 2004, and Smith's account of Stacy's phone call days before she vanished. All of this became part of the formal evidentiary record during those 2010 proceedings. After years of pre-trial motions and procedural battles, the trial began in 2012. It ran for 5 weeks in the Will County Courthouse in Joliet. The jury consisted of 7 men and 5 women. Witness Jeff Pachter testified that Peterson had offered him $25,000 to arrange Savio's death and told him he hoped the crime would be a secret he would take to his grave. The proceedings were contentious throughout. Judge Bermila at one point told prosecutors their conduct reflected shocking disrespect to the court. Defense attorneys sought mistrials on multiple occasions. On September 6, 2012, after approximately 14 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Drew Peterson of the premeditated first-degree murder of Kathleen Savio. Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow stated publicly, "We took him on, and we won." Kathleen Savio's mother, Marcia Savio, told reporters, "Finally somebody heard Kathleen's cry. 12 people did the right thing. Oh, thank God." Peterson was sentenced to 38 years in prison in 2013. An Illinois appellate court affirmed the conviction and sentence in 2015. In 2017, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld the conviction unanimously. The court's ruling on Drew's Law was precise. A defendant cannot benefit from their own wrongdoing by causing witnesses to be unavailable and then invoking a constitutional right to confront those same witnesses. That legal principle, established through this specific case, is now embedded in the formal appellate law of Illinois. In 2016, a second conviction was entered against Drew Peterson in a separate proceeding. Over the course of his imprisonment, he had expressed, in recorded communications, fears that Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow would eventually charge him in connection with Stacy Peterson's disappearance. In those same communications, Peterson discussed having Glasgow killed. He was charged with solicitation of murder for hire, convicted, and sentenced to 40 years in prison, a sentence running consecutively with his existing 38 years. His earliest possible release date, as documented in public records, is May 7, 2081. He is in his early 70s as of this narration. His police pension was terminated by the Bolingbrook Police Pension Board, which found he used specialized police training and skills to plan and commit Savio's murder. Illinois courts upheld that finding on appeal. Throughout all of this, the trials, the convictions, the appeals, the additional charges, the pension proceedings, the nationally covered sentencing hearings, Stacy Peterson remained formally missing. Every legal development in the Kathleen Savio case was reported in proximity to her name. Every verdict, every sentence, every appeal generated fresh coverage that returned to the same unanswered question: where is Stacy? No charge has ever been filed in connection with her disappearance. The Illinois State Police have maintained consistently that their investigation is active and ongoing, and that they cannot provide further detail in order to protect its integrity. That statement, repeated across years, is the official record's answer to the question. It is not an answer in any practical sense. Our community understands what it feels like to watch a legal process produce one conviction, then a second, then a third set of proceedings, and still not provide the resolution a family most urgently needs. The conviction for Kathleen Savio's murder is documented and real. Its consequences will outlast Peterson's natural lifespan, but it does not tell Stacy Peterson's children where their mother is. It does not allow for a burial. It does not close the file on a 23-year-old woman who was supposed to be painting a house on a Sunday morning. The family spokeswoman, Pamela Bosco, stated publicly after the September 2012 verdict, they tried keeping her out of that courtroom, and eventually, two profound statements were made by her, and that's what did it. They sealed his fate. The her in that statement was Stacy Peterson, whose words, admitted under Drew's law, were heard by a jury even though she was not present to speak them. In January 2022, a Will County judge agreed to hear Drew Peterson's motion to vacate the Savio murder conviction, finding a gist of a constitutional claim in his 6-page handwritten submission. Peterson argued that key hearsay witnesses should not have been permitted to testify, and that his original lead defense attorney prioritized media attention over effective representation. The Will County State's Attorney's Office filed a detailed 23-page response, arguing there was no merit to the claims. As of January 2025, a judge found Peterson mentally competent to continue those proceedings. The appeal remains ongoing. In 2022, a separate development brought the case back into public focus. Drew Peterson's former lead defense attorney, Joel Brodsky, who had represented Peterson at the 2012 Savio murder trial, made statements to WGN News suggesting he might reveal information about Stacy Peterson's fate. A Will County judge issued a gag order in response to those statements. Cassandra Kales, speaking to the Chicago Sun-Times, was direct about where she stood. "If I got my sister back, yes, I would back him up." That statement, from a woman who had spent nearly 15 years searching for her sister, addressing a defense attorney who had fought against accountability in the case, captures something essential about the human dimension of this investigation. Kales made clear she would prioritize learning the truth about her sister's fate over any other consideration. The gag order meant no public disclosure followed, but the moment itself demonstrated that information about Stacy Peterson's fate may exist in private hands in ways that have not been shared with the official record. In the years since Stacy Peterson's disappearance, her sister Cassandra Kales has conducted what amounts to a sustained, independent investigation and recovery effort. By her own documented account, given across multiple press conferences and media interviews, she had sonar equipment in the water 22 days after her sister disappeared and detected what she describes as a full-flesh female figure below the surface. She stated publicly that law enforcement did not act and that she was threatened with arrest if she tried to act herself. In the spring of 2008, she says she found what appeared to be a body again, with evidence of decomposition, and that state police conducted a dive without retrieving anything. In May 2021, Kales submitted a tip to law enforcement based on sonar readings from the Des Plaines River near the Lockport Powerhouse, north of Joliet. She had spent years and her own money on increasingly advanced sonar technology, eventually bringing in equipment from Alaska. Her remote-operated vehicle detected what appeared to be skeletal remains on the riverbed. She reported this to authorities in May 2021. An official search did not happen until October 2021, 5 months later, when Illinois State Police and the FBI conducted a search of that area. The search turned up nothing. At a press conference on October 19, 2021, Kales said, "How many times do I have to hand my sister, or whoever it is, to them on a silver platter, and again they do nothing? We told them about this in May, but they waited 5 months to search." She also said, "It literally sucks the life out of me because I know she's there." Illinois State Police confirmed the investigation remained active and ongoing and declined further comment. In March 2026, reporting confirmed that Cassandra Kales had raised approximately $9,000 through a GoFundMe page for a new independent recovery effort focused on the Chicago Sanitary and Shipping Canal. Her stated purpose, articulated publicly on multiple occasions across nearly 2 decades, was both to give her sister a proper burial and to demonstrate to Stacy's children that their mother did not choose to leave them. That purpose speaks directly to one of the most lasting human costs of this case. 2 children who grew up carrying the unanswered question of whether their mother abandoned them by choice. The documented record of the case, the sworn testimony, the physical evidence, the cessation of all contact, points overwhelmingly in one direction. But without official confirmation, without remains, without a formal accounting, the question remains technically open, and that technical openness has real human consequences for the people who live inside it. Stacy's sister-in-law, Norma Peterson, said publicly in October 2022, "We loved Stacy. We miss her. She was a part of our family. I just know that this beautiful young woman would not leave her children. Family meant everything to her, and she would not willingly leave this family." Norma Peterson has channeled her grief into advocacy for women experiencing domestic abuse, a documented effort to convert personal loss into practical protection for others in similar situations. Drew Peterson's oldest son, Stephen Peterson, publicly stated in 2021 that he now believes his father was responsible for the deaths of both Kathleen Savio and Stacy Peterson. That statement is part of the documented public record. It represents one of the most personally painful dimensions of this case's long aftermath. Adult children navigating a history they had no control over and arriving, publicly, at conclusions about a parent's guilt in the absence of any official closure on the disappearance. Our community understands what it means to grow up in the shadow of a loss that has no official closure. The 2 children Stacy Peterson had with Drew Peterson, the boy who was 4 years old and the girl who was 2 on October 28, 2007, are now young adults. They grew up while a grand jury heard evidence about their father. They grew up while a murder trial unfolded in Will County for the death of a different wife. They grew up while appeals moved through courts and additional charges were filed, and their father received a combined sentence he will almost certainly never complete. They grew up while their aunt spent years on waterways with sonar equipment, looking for their mother. Whatever they were told at each stage, whatever they pieced together from court documents and archived news coverage, and the formal silence of the official record on their mother's specific case, none of it gives them back the person who should have been there from the very beginning. The confirmed investigative and legal record of this case establishes the following. Drew Peterson was convicted on September 6, 2012, of the premeditated first-degree murder of Kathleen Savio. That conviction has survived every level of appellate review through the unanimous Illinois Supreme Court decision in 2017. He is also a convicted felon for solicitation of murder for hire. He is serving a combined 78-year sentence with an earliest possible release date of May 7, 2081. He has been named by the Illinois State Police as the prime suspect in the disappearance and potential homicide of Stacy Peterson. No formal charge has ever been filed in connection with her disappearance. The documented evidentiary record connected to Stacy Peterson includes Thomas Morphy's sworn testimony describing a warm blue barrel of approximately 150 pounds carried from the master bedroom of 6 Pheasant Chase Court on October 28 and loaded into a Yukon Denali. Sharon Bachowski's sworn testimony that Stacy told her she was already dead. Reverend Scory's admitted testimony that Stacy said she woke on March 1, 2004 to find her husband absent. Attorney Harry Smith's admitted testimony about Stacy's October 2007 phone call asking about prior homicide. The physical fact of Stacy's car found 400 yards from her home while Peterson claimed she had driven away voluntarily. The permanent cessation of all cell phone activity after October 28, 2007, and the complete absence of any verified transaction, confirmed sighting, or independently documented evidence corroborating Peterson's stated account. What the documented record does not contain is a confirmed location for Stacy Peterson's remains. There is no formal charge for her disappearance. There is no complete official account of what happened between the time she left Pheasant Chase Court on the morning of October 28, 2007, and the moment her sister stood at the Bolingbrook Police Department desk at 1:36 in the morning on October 29th. That gap, those hours, are the core of what the public record cannot fill. Investigators have not closed it. A grand jury heard evidence in its direction. Court testimony has circled around it. The blue barrel described by Thomas Morphy under oath is the closest the official record comes to an account of those hours. But it remains an account, not a confirmed conclusion. And that distinction matters enormously, both legally and for the family living inside the uncertainty it creates. Our community understands the particular weight of a grief that cannot fully form. The grief of a family that has no grave to visit, no officially confirmed moment of loss, no ending. There is only the last confirmed day, October 28, 2007, and then silence. Cassandra Kales has described this openly for nearly 20 years. She has not stopped. One of the most lasting institutional consequences of this case is the legislation it produced. Drew's Law exists because of the specific evidentiary gap created when the people most relevant to a murder case were silenced. The Illinois legislature acted to close that gap. The law survived every constitutional challenge brought against it through the state's highest court. Other jurisdictions have since studied Illinois' experience as a reference point for thinking about evidentiary reform in cases where witnesses have been made permanently unavailable. The human cost that produced the law, 2 women unable to testify at the trial of the man accused of killing them, is inseparable from its legislative and legal history. The outstanding questions in this case remain without official resolution. The location of Stacy Peterson's remains has not been officially confirmed. The blue barrel described in Thomas Morphy's sworn testimony has never been located. No formal charge has been brought in connection with her disappearance. Drew Peterson's motion to vacate his Savio murder conviction is in ongoing legal proceedings, with a finding of mental competency issued in January 2025, allowing those proceedings to continue. The Illinois State Police investigation into Stacy's disappearance is documented as active, with the agency declining to provide further public detail. A man is in prison for the murder of his third wife. A grand jury heard evidence regarding his fourth. Courts admitted sworn testimony about a warm blue barrel carried out of a bedroom, and Stacy Peterson has still not been found. All of that is simultaneously true, and the coexistence of those facts in a single case record is the central reality of where things stand. As of this narration in 2026, Cassandra Cales is still searching. She has said publicly that she wants to bring her sister home, as a person, as her sister, as someone who deserves a place to be mourned with finality. She has said this not once but many times, in many settings, across many years, at press conferences attended by television crews, in interviews with newspapers, in fundraising pages that describe the search in plain and direct language. The persistence of that effort, sustained across nearly 2 decades without official resolution, is itself a documented fact of this case. The children Stacy left behind are young adults now. They deserve to know that their mother did not choose to leave them. That is the documented human core of an effort that has now continued for nearly 20 years. There are families in similar circumstances across the United States. Cases where a loved one is officially missing, where the investigation is officially open, and where someone in the family has spent years, sometimes decades, conducting an independent search because official resources have been insufficient or the official response has been inadequate to the evidence available. Cassandra Cales is not an anomaly in that regard. She is part of a documented pattern of families who fill the gaps that official investigations leave open. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as NamUs, maintains a publicly accessible database of missing persons cases, and the Stacy Peterson case is part of that record. Tips can be submitted directly through that system. The FBI maintains its own tip lines. In this specific case, the Illinois State Police have consistently invited contact from anyone with information they believe is relevant. More broadly, if someone in your life has expressed fear, if someone has told you they were in danger, if someone has gone unreachable when they should have been available, if the explanation offered for an absence does not match the physical facts, those observations are worth acting on. The documented record of this case shows, with painful precision, what can happen when fear is expressed and not fully addressed. Stacy Peterson told a neighbor she was already dead. She told a pastor her husband was absent the night another wife was killed. She called an attorney days before she vanished to ask about prior homicide. She said the things a person in danger sometimes says. The record is entirely clear about what she said. What it also reflects is the distance between those words being spoken and the full weight they deserved being applied in time. Stacy Ann Peterson was born on January 20th, 1984, in Downers Grove, Illinois. She was 23 years old when she was last seen. She had 2 small children. She was her sister's best friend. She had grown up knowing exactly what it meant to have a mother disappear, and she had built a life anyway. She was trying, by the documented testimony of every person who knew her and has spoken publicly, to find a way out of a situation that had become life-threatening. She had told people she was in danger. She had reached out to a pastor, to a neighbor, to an attorney. She had done what she could, in the form she could do it. She never got the chance to do more. That is what the documented record says. That is what is true. And as long as she has not been found, as long as the official file remains open and her children are still waiting for an answer, the record of this case is incomplete. A missing person, an active investigation, a sister who has not stopped searching, 2 children who deserve to grow up knowing their mother, and a question that no court has yet formally answered. The man at the center of this case is in prison. The law that his conduct produced is on the books. The legal proceedings surrounding his convictions continue. And still, Stacy Ann Peterson, born January 20th, 1984, has not been found. That is where this case stands. That is where the record ends.